Welcome back, everyone. We're taking a deep dive into Then and Now, the memoir of Max Riggsbee Sr. We're fortunate enough to have some excerpts, and let me tell you, they're incredible. They paint such a vivid picture of what it was like to grow up black in the Jim Crow South.
It's a really powerful story, and as you delve into it, you realize it's not just about Mr. Riggsbee's individual experience. It offers a lens through which we can examine race relations, both past and present. How much has changed, how much hasn't.
Absolutely. And the memoir starts in a really interesting way, with Mr. Riggsbee, now 89, reflecting on how memory works. How some things, especially painful memories, might stay hidden, almost like his mind's trying to protect him.
It's like he's setting the stage for us, and then he takes us right into the heart of it. Rocky Mount, North Carolina in the 1930s and 40s. Picture this. A town buzzing with industry, driven by the railroad, highways, agriculture, but at the same time, deeply, starkly divided by race.
Yeah, and right away we meet his father, Mac. This guy was a jack of all trades, a chef, a chauffeur, even a valet for Kay Kaiser, the famous band leader.
And what's fascinating is how Mac creates this larger-than-life comedic persona. Even his full name is almost a performance. Alfred Madison Maxwell Clementine Cordell Riggsbee. It makes you wonder if this was a way for him to navigate the world, the limited opportunities for black men back then, you know?
It's like he was trying to find his own way to make a mark. And we get a real sense of their home life, too. Their two-bedroom house on Atlantic Avenue, the last one on this dead-end, unpaved street.
But here's the interesting thing. Atlantic Avenue was considered the home of Rocky Mount's black elite. Think doctors, lawyers, even famous athletes like Buck Leonard lived there. So even within segregation, there were these layers of status and achievement.
It shows how complex black life was under Jim Crow.
Hmm.
And Mr. Riggsbee really brings his childhood to life. Walking to school, collecting war stamps, helping his mom can vegetables, the excitement of Negro History Week, all these everyday moments.
Those details are so important, right? Because they remind us that segregation wasn't just some abstract idea. It was woven into the fabric of their daily lives, shaping every interaction, every experience.
Totally. And he tells this story about one particularly harsh winter day when he and his sister took shelter at a friend's house on their way home from school. Something so simple. But it leads to a worried mother and a punishment he remembers, even now.
It highlights the constant pressure black families lived under, always aware of their place, always trying to avoid any trouble, any interaction that could be misconstrued by the white community.
Always having to be careful. Then we're introduced to something called the June German, an all-night dance event hosted by the Rhythm Club, a group of black businessmen.
Now, this event was huge. They brought in some of the biggest names in black music. Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington. People came from all over to be a part of it. The energy must have been incredible.
And it's amazing because Mr. Riggsbee's father was instrumental in bringing these musicians to Rocky Mount, even hosted Count Basie in their own home.
Think about that, right? In the midst of segregation, they created this space for joy, celebration, for black culture to thrive. It speaks volumes about the resilience and resourcefulness of the black community during that era.
Definitely. And it shows how music could bring people together, create these moments of escape, these pockets of hope in a world that often felt very bleak.
Absolutely. It was a way to affirm their identity, their creativity, their humanity, even in the face of such adversity. And, the book actually has copies of telegrams from the booking agency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, showing how his father worked to get these bands, the logistics of it all.
That's amazing. What kind of things did the telegrams say?
Well, the language is really telling. Even in those simple messages, you see the racism of the time. Like, they refer to black singers as boy or girl instead of male vocalist or,
It's shocking how casual it is.
Right. Like, it was just normal, accepted language. And it makes you think about how pervasive that racism was, how deeply embedded in every aspect of society.
It's a good reminder that the details matter, even the ones that seem small.
Yeah, they reveal so much about the power dynamics at play. Oh, and another thing that struck me, during the June German, his family's cafe stayed open all night, his mom running the whole thing.
Wow, that's dedication.
Well, it was also smart business, because there were no hotels or motels for black folks in Rocky Mount.
So they really had to create their own spaces, their own systems.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows how interconnected everything was, the music, the community, the economics of it all.
We also get a sense of Mac's humor in these stories. Mr. Riggsbee describes how his father would try to create this comedic persona, almost like Eddie Rochester Anderson did with Jack Benny.
Yeah, there's this thread of humor running through the memoir. And I think it speaks to how Black folks used humor to navigate those times, to entertain, but also maybe to challenge expectations, to subtly push back against the roles they were forced into.
Like finding a way to express themselves within a system that was trying to silence them.
Exactly. And then there are these really heartwarming parts about summer trips to a segregated beat in Virginia with his family.
It's nice to see those moments of joy amidst all the hardship.
And those trips weren't just vacations, they were a necessity, right? Because Black families couldn't go to the regular beaches. So they had to create their own spaces for leisure, for relaxation, for simply being themselves without the constant threat of discrimination.
It makes you appreciate those moments of respite even more. But the memoir doesn't shy away from the family's struggles either. We see the impact of his father's frequent absences because of his work with Kay Kaiser and the favoritism shown towards his sister Clementine. It creates real tension.
It's important that he includes that because it adds another layer to the story. These family dynamics, the strained relationships, the unspoken resentments, they were all shaped in some way by the pressures and injustices of the time.
It wasn't just about external forces. It was about how those forces rippled through their personal lives.
Yeah, it's like this reminder that Jim Crow wasn't just about laws and policies. It was about the lived experiences of Black families, the way it impacted their relationships, their sense of self.
Their whole world. And later in the book, there's a shift. Mr. Riggsbee talks about a time when his father is no longer in the picture.
Right, and this absence speaks to a larger reality for many Black families during that era, right? Fathers often had to leave to find work, to support their families, and it left a huge void.
It's a reminder of the sacrifices so many Black families had to make just to survive.
And we see Mr. Rigsbee's resilience. He talks about teaching himself to drive at 14, getting his license on his 15th birthday.
Wow. Talk about taking charge.
It shows his determination, his desire to carve out his own path, even in the face of so many obstacles. And then we follow him to school, first to Lincoln Elementary Junior High. He had to cross these railroad tracks and a major highway just to get there.
It's crazy to think about the physical barriers they had to overcome.
And those barriers weren't just physical, right? They were symbolic of the segregation that permeated every aspect of their lives, limiting their access to education, to opportunity.
Keeping them separate. Unequal. And then on to Booker T. Washington High School, the only high school for Black students in Rocky Mount.
The fact that there was only one option, it speaks volumes about the inequality baked into the system, how education was used as a tool to control and limit Black aspirations.
It's a stark reminder of how different their experience was, how much harder they had to fight for even the most basic rights.
Yeah, and it makes Mr. Rigsbee's achievements all more remarkable. He even shares a story about almost getting expelled during his senior year by the principal, Artie Armstrong.
Oh no, what happened?
He doesn't go into the details, but it makes you think about the power dynamics at play, the way Black students were often subject to harsher discipline, unfair punishments.
It's like they were always walking on eggshells, always under scrutiny.
Right, and it highlights the systemic nature of racism, how it operated not just through laws and policies, but through these everyday interactions, these subtle forms of control.
It's a reminder that Jim Crow wasn't just about the big, dramatic events. It was about the countless small injustices that chipped away at their dignity, their sense of self-worth.
Absolutely. And then the memoir takes this really powerful turn. Mr. Riggsbee describes returning to Rocky Mount years later.
It's like he's coming full circle, revisiting his past.
But it's not a simple nostalgic journey. It's a reckoning with memory, with change, with the ways the past continues to shape the present.
And he doesn't sugarcoat it. He describes the contrast between the bustling town he remembers and the deserted streets he encounters on his return.
Those empty buildings, those vacant lots, they're like a physical manifestation of the economic decline that hit many southern towns, the loss of industry, the lingering effects of segregation.
It's a stark reminder of how much things have changed, but also how much hasn't.
Yeah, there's this bittersweet quality to it. He sees progress, but also the deep scars left behind.
His childhood home on Atlantic Avenue, once a symbol of pride and belonging, is now surrounded by vacant lots and dilapidated houses.
It's a powerful image, right?
Yeah.
It speaks to the challenges that persist in many Black communities even today. The poverty, the lack of investment, the systemic barriers to opportunity.
It's like the past is still casting a shadow.
And he visits his former schools, finds them either abandoned or repurposed. Those empty classrooms, those silent hallways, They hold a lot of memories, a lot of unspoken stories.
It makes you wonder about the generations of students who passed through those halls, the dreams they held, the obstacles they faced.
And the downtown areas, both the formerly white and black business districts, they're deserted too.
It's like this double loss, this shared decline that transcends racial lines.
Yeah, it speaks to these larger economic and social shifts that have reshaped communities across the nation, leaving behind a sense of displacement, of disillusionment.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of progress, there's always loss, always change, always the need to adapt and rebuild.
And through all this, Mr. Riggsbee leads us to contemplate the complexities of progress itself. He acknowledges the dismantling of Jim Crow, the advancements in civil rights, those hard-fought victories that transformed the legal and social landscape.
But he's not naive. He knows the fight is far from over.
He points out that while overt forms of racism have faded, more subtle forms persist, often hidden in plain sight.
Like they've gone underground, but they're still there, shaping our lives in insidious ways.
Exactly. And he expresses concern about the rise of divisive rhetoric in politics, the echo chambers of social media, where intolerance and misinformation can spread unchecked.
It's like we're in this new era of division, where it's so easy to get caught up in our own bubbles, to demonize those who disagree with us.
And he worries about the erosion of the federal safety net, those programs that have offered some protection for minorities since the dismantling of Jim Crow. He even cites voter suppression efforts in his home state of North Carolina as a particularly worrying example.
It's like a reminder that the gains we've made are fragile, that they can be chipped away at, undermined, if we're not vigilant.
And it connects his personal story to the larger political landscape, the ongoing struggle for social and economic justice.
It's interesting how he weaves his personal story with these broader thoughts about race in America today. He acknowledges the progress we've made since Jim Crow, how those overt, legally enforced forms of racism are mostly gone.
But he goes deeper than that. He talks about how racism adapts, how it takes on these more subtle, almost invisible forms. It's still there, but it's harder to pin down.
Yeah, and he's concerned about the rhetoric in politics these days, how social media creates these echo chambers where intolerance and misinformation can just run wild.
It's like we're losing the ability to have real conversations, to listen to different perspectives, and it makes it that much harder to address these issues head on.
He's also worried about the erosion of the safety net, those programs that have helped minorities since the end of Jim Crow. He even brings up voter suppression efforts in North Carolina, his home state, as a really troubling example.
It shows how fragile progress can be. It's like we're taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back, constantly having to fight to protect the gains we've made.
And he's honest about his own feelings, too. He admits to being pretty pessimistic about the possibility of truly unifying the country, given the political climate and the divisions we see all around us.
It's understandable, right? It's hard to stay optimistic when you see so much anger and division. But I think even in his pessimism, there's a glimmer of hope. Because he doesn't just give up. He keeps fighting. He keeps advocating for social and human inclusion for everyone.
That's what's so inspiring about him. He doesn't let the darkness overwhelm him. He keeps pushing for a better future.
Exactly. And he talks about the elephant in the room when it comes to social and political issues, those difficult things that people shy away from talking about openly and honestly.
It's like we're tiptoeing around these huge problems, afraid to really confront them.
And he talks about how America's center is being hollowed out, how people are drifting towards the extremes on issues of race, gender, ethnicity. All those areas where our differences should be strengths, they're becoming battlegrounds.
It's like we're losing that common ground, that shared sense of purpose.
And it makes the work of building a just and equitable society that much harder. But it also makes it that much more important.
Absolutely. And then towards the end of the book, he issues this powerful call to action. He tells readers, get up, stand up, fight for your rights. He even quotes Bob Marley, reminding us that we have to be unrelenting in our pursuit of justice.
It's a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. We can't just sit back and hope things will get better on their own. We have to be active participants in the fight for equality.
We have to keep pushing the needle forward, even when it feels like we're making no progress.
And he draws inspiration from Dr. King, too. He reminds us to keep moving, even when we can't see the path ahead, even when the solutions seem far off.
It's about having faith, about believing that a better world is possible.
And that's the essence of hope, right? The belief that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles, we can't give up. We have to keep striving, keep pushing, keep believing in the possibility of a better tomorrow.
Then and Now is such a powerful memoir. It takes us through history, through Mr. Rigsbee's personal struggles and triumphs, and it leaves us with this challenge to do better, to be better.
It's a call to remember the past, to learn from it, and to work towards a future where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It definitely does. It makes you think about your own role in the fight for justice, the ways you can make a difference, no matter how small.
It's a reminder that every voice matters, every action counts, and that even in the darkest of times, hope can be a powerful force for change.
And that's a message we all need to hear. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you, and we hope you continue to explore these issues, to engage in meaningful conversations, and to work towards creating a more just and equitable world.